The unexpected visitor. Ethan Green lived a quiet life on the edge of the Martian colony. His small workshop, filled with tools and scraps of old machines, was the place where he spent most of his time. He had come to Mars years ago, hoping for adventure, but life on the red planet turned out to be just as dull as Earth. Ethan repaired broken equipment for miners and settlers, earning just enough to get by. One night, everything changed. The Martian desert was silent, as it always was, until a strange noise broke the stillness. A loud metallic crash echoed through the thin atmosphere, shaking the walls of Ethan's workshop. He dropped his wrench and froze, his heart pounding. The noise didn't sound like anything he'd heard before. It wasn't the rumble of mining equipment or the groan of shifting machinery. This was something else. Curiosity tugged at him. Grabbing a flashlight and a rusty old pistol he kept for emergencies, Ethan stepped outside. The red sand stretched endlessly under the pale light of Mars's moons. The air was cold, and the wind carried a faint metallic scent. Ethan followed the direction of the sound, his boots crunching on the sand. A faint glow appeared in the distance, flickering like a dying flame. As he got closer, he saw it, a sleek, metallic ship unlike anything he'd ever seen before. It was partially buried in the sand, its once smooth surface scorched and dented. Sparks flew from a gash in its side, and strange symbols glowed faintly on its hull. He hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to turn back. This was clearly not human technology. It could be dangerous, or worse, it could attract the attention of the colony authorities. But then he saw movement. A figure stumbled out of the ship, collapsing onto the sand. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. It was a woman, or at least she looked like one. Her skin shimmered with a silvery hue under the moonlight, and her hair floated around her like it had a life of its own. She was tall, slender, and clearly not human. "Help, please," she said in a voice that was soft but urgent. A small device on her wrist translated her words into English, though they sounded garbled and uneven. Ethan's grip tightened on his flashlight. "Who? What are you?" he asked, his voice trembling. The alien woman lifted her head, her eyes glowing faintly. "I am Zarian. My ship. It's broken. I need help." Ethan looked around nervously. If anyone else found her, she'd likely be captured or worse. The colony had strict rules about alien encounters. Officially, no one was supposed to interfere. Unofficially, most aliens who showed up near human settlements were never seen again. He sighed and knelt down beside her. "You're injured," he said, noticing a deep gash on her arm. Her silvery blood shimmered as it seeped onto the sand. "I'll live," Zarian replied. "But my ship, it must be repaired, or I'll die here." Ethan glanced at the damaged vessel. The technology was far beyond anything he'd ever worked on, but the basics seemed similar. He was a mechanic, after all. If anyone could jury-rig a solution, it was him. "All right," he said, standing up. "I'll help you. But we need to move fast. If anyone else finds you, we're both in trouble." Zarian nodded weakly. Ethan helped her to her feet, surprised by how light she was. Together, they made their way to his workshop, leaving the wrecked ship behind for now. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, might be watching them from the shadows. Inside the workshop, Ethan cleared a space on the workbench and motioned for Zarian to sit. She winced as she lowered herself onto the stool. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer now. "You're taking a great risk." "I guess I've always been bad at following rules," Ethan said with a nervous chuckle. "Let me get something for that cut." As he cleaned her wound with a sterilizer, Zarian studied him with those glowing eyes. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Ethan paused, then shrugged. "Because you needed help. Simple as that." Zarian tilted her head, as if trying to understand him. "On my world, such kindness is rare." "Well, on mine, it's not exactly common either," Ethan admitted. "But I guess I'm not like most people." A faint smile crossed Zarian's lips. "Perhaps that is why fate led me to you." Before Ethan could respond, a loud beeping sound filled the room. Zarian's wrist device lit up, displaying a series of symbols. Her expression darkened. "What is it?" Ethan asked. "They found me," Zarian said, her voice filled with fear. "The ones who attacked my ship. They're coming." Ethan's heart sank. He had no idea what he'd just gotten himself into, but it was clear there was no turning back now. A fragile alliance. Ethan leaned against his workbench, wiping his hands on an oil-stained rag, his mind racing. Zarian sat across from him, her shimmering skin dimming slightly, as if exhaustion dulled her glow. The strange device on her wrist had gone silent, but its earlier warning still rang in his ears. Someone dangerous was looking for her, and they wouldn't be far behind. "You're sure they're coming?" Ethan asked, breaking the tense silence. Zarian's glowing eyes met his. "They will not stop until I am captured, or dead." Ethan swallowed hard. He wasn't a hero, just a mechanic with a knack for fixing things. Yet here he was, harboring an alien fugitive and preparing for who knew what kind of trouble. "Well, sitting here isn't an option. We need a plan." Zarian stood, though she swayed slightly. Her movements were graceful, even in her weakened state. "My ship must be repaired. Without it, I am vulnerable." Ethan rubbed his chin, glancing out the workshop window. The desert outside was empty, for now, but he knew how fast that could change. "Your ship's in rough shape," he said, shaking his head. "That kind of damage, it's going to take more than duct tape and a few hours." Zarian raised a delicate silver eyebrow. "Duct tape? Never mind," Ethan muttered. "Point is, it's not a quick fix, but I can try. If we're lucky, I might be able to patch it up enough to get you flying again." She tilted her head, studying him. "Why are you helping me, truly?" Ethan hesitated. He didn't have a clear answer. Maybe it was her desperation, or the way she looked at him with those unearthly eyes, full of hope and fear. Maybe it was the thrill of doing something that mattered, for once. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said finally. "And I guess I don't like bullies, no matter what planet they're from." A faint smile crossed her lips. "Your kindness is unexpected, but I am grateful." Ethan waved her gratitude off, though he couldn't help feeling a strange warmth in her words. "Yeah, well, don't thank me yet. We've got work to do." The two of them ventured back to the crash site under the cover of darkness. The moonlight bathed the alien ship in an eerie glow, and Ethan's breath caught again at its beauty. The sleek, organic design seemed to shift and pulse, like it was alive. "It's incredible," he muttered, running a hand over the cool, metallic surface. "I've never seen anything like this." "It is a vessel of the Aurelian fleet," Zarian said, her voice tinged with pride. "Our ships are bonded to us. They feel as we feel, and they heal as we heal." Ethan glanced at the gaping hole in the hull. "Well, it looks like this one's feeling pretty awful." Zarian placed a hand on the ship, and the faint symbols along its surface flickered. "Its core is intact, but the energy conduits are severed. I lack the tools to restore them." Ethan crouched beside the damaged section, his flashlight casting long shadows. The conduits inside the ship hummed faintly, emitting a soft blue glow. They looked like nothing he'd ever worked with before, but he spotted something familiar in their layout. "It's not too different from electrical wiring," he said, more to himself than to Zarian. "If I can rig a bypass, we might have a chance." He stood and turned to her. "I'll need some parts from my workshop. Old relays, conduits. I think I can adapt them." Zarian nodded. "I will assist you." Ethan hesitated. "No offense, but you're not exactly in great shape. You should rest." Her eyes flashed, a hint of stubborn determination shining through. "Rest is a luxury I cannot afford. If we fail, I am as good as dead." Ethan sighed. "All right, just don't overdo it, okay?" As they worked together, Zarian proved to be a quick learner. She handed him tools and adjusted components with precision, despite her injuries. Ethan found himself impressed by her calm focus. She didn't panic, even when things didn't go smoothly. "Where are you from?" Ethan asked, breaking the silence. Zarian's gaze softened. "Irilia, a planet of light and harmony, far from here. Our people live in unity, sharing thoughts and emotions through a deep connection. We cherish peace above all else." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Doesn't sound like the kind of place that makes enemies. So why are these guys after you?" Her expression darkened. "Not all species value peace. The Scar, a race of warlords, seek to dominate and destroy. My people resisted their advances, and now they seek to punish us." Ethan frowned. "And you ended up here because—" "I was on a mission to deliver vital information to an allied fleet. They ambushed me before I could complete it." She hesitated, then added, "If they recover that information, many lives will be lost." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. This was bigger than he'd realized. "So fixing your ship isn't just about saving you. It's about saving your whole planet." Zarian nodded. "And perhaps others as well." Ethan took a deep breath, the weight of her words settling over him. He wasn't just helping a stranded traveler. He was caught in the middle of a war. "Well," he said, forcing a grin, "no pressure, right?" Zarian tilted her head, confused, but then a small smile broke through. "Your humor is strange, but comforting." Ethan laughed softly, shaking his head. "Let's hope I'm better at fixing ships than cracking jokes." As they worked through the night, an unspoken bond began to form between them. Ethan didn't fully understand Zarian or her world, but he could see the strength in her and the stakes of what they were trying to do. For the first time in years, he felt like he was part of something bigger, something worth fighting for. And he wasn't about to let her down. The challenge of repairs. Ethan stood in front of the alien ship, hands on his hips, staring at the massive damage. The hull was torn open like an animal clawing at prey, exposing delicate conduits that pulsed faintly with light. Each flicker seemed like the heartbeat of the vessel itself, a reminder of how alive this technology felt. The Martian wind howled around him, as if mocking his determination. "You've worked miracles before, Ethan," he muttered to himself, though this task felt impossibly daunting. Behind him, Zarian approached with quiet grace, her silvery skin catching the soft light of the distant moons. She carried a bundle of salvaged components they had scavenged from the ship's storage. Even in her weakened state, she moved with a confidence that unsettled Ethan, like she knew exactly how high the stakes were. "I have gathered what I could," she said, placing the parts on the ground beside him. "Will it be enough?" Ethan crouched down, sorting through the alien materials. Some pieces looked vaguely familiar, connectors, panels, and coils that shared similarities with human technology, but others were completely alien, almost organic in design. One piece even seemed to twitch when he touched it, and he yanked his hand back instinctively. "This stuff is strange," he said, shaking his head. "It's like your ship is half machine, half alive." Zarian knelt beside him, her expression serious. "It is. Our vessels are symbiotic, designed to bond with their pilots. They adapt to our needs, but they also require care in return." Ethan sighed, already feeling the weight of the task. "All right, let's make this work. But I'll warn you, this isn't going to be pretty." He pulled out a small toolkit from his bag and began testing the alien components. Sparks flew as he tried to bridge the severed conduits with wires salvaged from his workshop. The ship reacted, its faint hum growing louder, but the lights flickered unevenly. "It's like patching up a space dragon with duct tape and bubble gum," Ethan muttered, shaking his head. Zarian raised a silver eyebrow. "What is bubble gum?" Ethan smirked. "Never mind. Just keep an eye on those readouts for me." Hours passed as they worked in near silence, interrupted only by the occasional crackle of a failed connection or the hiss of a plasma torch. Ethan's hands were blistered, and sweat dripped down his forehead, despite the chill of the desert night. Every time he thought he'd made progress, Another problem revealed itself. "This ship of yours is a real piece of work," he grumbled, his frustration bubbling over. "I mean, couldn't your people make something a little less temperamental?" Zarian looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Our technology is advanced beyond your understanding. It is not temperamental. It is precise." Ethan shot her a look. "Yeah, well, precise doesn't help much when you're stuck on a backwater planet with a mechanic who's making this up as he goes." For a moment, he thought she might be offended, but then she surprised him. A soft, melodic laugh escaped her lips, a sound so unexpected it made him pause. "You are unusual," she said, a faint smile breaking through her usual seriousness. "Your humor masks your frustration, but I sense your determination. You will not give up." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "Yeah, well, giving up's not really my style. Not when someone's counting on me." The sincerity in his voice seemed to resonate with her. Zarian placed a hand on his arm, her touch cool but reassuring. "And for that, I am grateful." As dawn broke over the Martian horizon, the ship began to show signs of life. The conduits pulsed more steadily, and the soft hum grew into a low rhythmic vibration. Ethan wiped his hands on his pants, his exhaustion tempered by a glimmer of hope. "I think we've got a shot," he said, stepping back to admire their work. "It's not perfect, but it should be enough to get you off this rock." Zarian nodded, but her expression remained cautious. "The repairs are only the first step. We must test the systems and ensure the core is stable, and we must do it quickly. They will come." Ethan didn't need to ask who they were. The sense of urgency hung over them like a storm cloud. He looked back at the ship, then at Zarian, and took a deep breath. "All right," he said, rolling his shoulders. "Let's fire this thing up and see if it sings." As Zarian stepped into the ship to begin the system checks, Ethan felt a flicker of pride. He wasn't an expert in alien technology, and he'd never faced anything like this before, but against all odds, they were making progress. But as he turned to retrieve his tools, a faint sound reached his ears, a low, distant hum that didn't belong to Zarian's ship. His blood ran cold. He looked up at the horizon, squinting against the rising sun. There, just a speck in the distance, he saw movement. Ships. And they were heading straight for them. The alien bond. Ethan leaned against the side of the alien ship, wiping sweat from his brow as Zarian ran her slender fingers across the console. The ship's lights flickered and pulsed in a rhythm that felt almost alive. A faint vibration hummed underfoot, a sign that their patchwork repairs were holding, at least for now. "You've got a real knack for pushing machines past their limits," Zarian said, her voice carrying a rare note of admiration. Ethan chuckled, crossing his arms. "Well, when you grow up fixing junkers that shouldn't be on the road, you learn a thing or two about keeping things running." Zarian turned, her glowing eyes studying him with a curiosity that made him feel exposed. "Your world seems crude, yet you manage to adapt with remarkable ingenuity. It's fascinating." Ethan shrugged, trying to brush off the compliment. "Necessity's a great teacher. Speaking of which, your ship's running on duct tape and prayers right now. We're not out of the woods yet." Zarian tilted her head, her expression softening. "Woods?" "Never mind," Ethan muttered, scratching the back of his neck. "Figure of speech." She smiled faintly, a gesture that seemed almost unnatural on her otherwise serene face. "Your humor, it confuses me, but it also intrigues me." As the hours passed, the two of them worked side by side, testing the ship's systems and fine-tuning the repairs. The initial awkwardness between them began to fade, replaced by a tentative camaraderie. Despite their differences, they found a strange rhythm in their work, one that felt oddly natural. At one point, Ethan noticed Zarian struggling to adjust a panel, her movements slower than before. "Hey," he said, stepping closer. "You okay? You've been pushing yourself pretty hard." She hesitated, then sighed. "My energy reserves are depleted. The repairs have taken a toll." Ethan frowned. Energy reserves. You mean like food? In a way, Zarian replied. Our bodies draw sustenance from the energy around us. Light, heat, even emotion. But this planet's environment is lacking. Ethan's mind raced. He'd always thought of himself as a practical man, not one to dwell on abstract concepts like energy or emotion. But Zarian's words struck a chord. He glanced at the ship, then back at her. Wait here, he said, disappearing into his workshop. When he returned, he was holding a small solar generator. It's not much, but maybe this can help. Zarian's eyes widened in surprise. You would share this with me? Why not? Ethan said, setting it up beside her. I don't exactly have a use for it right now, and you need it more than I do. As the generator hummed to life, a soft glow returned to Zarian's skin. She closed her eyes, a look of relief washing over her face. This is sufficient. Thank you. Ethan leaned against the wall, watching her. You know, for someone who's supposed to be from some advanced, enlightened race, you're not great at asking for help. Zarian opened her eyes, her expression thoughtful. On Aurelia, we do not ask. We share. It is difficult to adjust to the individualism of your species. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Individualism. That's a fancy way of saying we're all a little selfish. Not you, Zarian said softly, her gaze steady. You chose to help me when you could have walked away. That is not selfish. Her words caught Ethan off guard, and he shifted uncomfortably. Yeah, well, I didn't exactly have a lot going on, he said, trying to downplay the moment. Zarian's smile returned, small but genuine. Your humility is misplaced, Ethan. As they continued working, Zarian began to share more about her world. She spoke of vast cities built on floating platforms, powered by crystalline energy that sang in harmony with the planet's core. She described the Aurelian bond, a connection that allowed her people to share thoughts and feelings without words. Ethan listened, captivated. Her world sounded like something out of a dream, beautiful, peaceful, and so unlike the cold, harsh reality he'd always known. What's it like? He asked quietly. Being connected like that. Zarian's expression grew wistful. It is difficult to describe. Imagine knowing, truly knowing, that you are never alone. That your thoughts, your fears, your joys are shared and understood. It is comforting. Ethan looked away, his chest tightening. Sounds nice. Zarian studied him for a moment, her glowing eyes softening. You carry loneliness, Ethan. It clings to you like a shadow. He laughed bitterly. Yeah, well, welcome to being human. Zarian reached out, placing a hand on his arm. Her touch was cool, yet strangely soothing. You are not as alone as you believe. For a moment, they stood in silence, the bond between them deepening in ways neither fully understood. Ethan didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, he felt a connection, a spark of something greater than himself. And for the first time in years, he dared to hope. The danger looms. Ethan sat cross-legged on the dusty ground, his eyes fixed on the glowing interface of Zarian's ship. The repairs had been grueling, but the vessel was finally showing signs of life. The steady hum of its systems felt like a small victory, a sign that they might actually pull this off. But his relief was short-lived. A sharp, shrill tone erupted from Zarian's wrist device, piercing the silence. She stiffened immediately, her silvery skin dimming as her glowing eyes darted to the horizon. Ethan scrambled to his feet, heart pounding. What's that? He asked, already dreading the answer. Zarian's expression was grim. They're here. Ethan followed her gaze. At first, he saw nothing, just the endless red dunes stretching into the distance. Then, faint specks appeared on the horizon, moving fast. His stomach twisted. How many? He asked, his voice tight. Zarian adjusted the device on her wrist, the symbols flickering across the surface. 3 ships, small, but heavily armed. Scar hunters. Ethan's throat went dry. He didn't know much about the scar, but the name alone sent a chill down his spine. He glanced at the ship, still tethered to his makeshift power rig, and then back at Zarian. "Can you fight them?" She shook her head. "My ship's weapons are offline. The repairs we've made will allow me to fly, but not to defend myself." Ethan's mind raced. He wasn't a soldier or a strategist, just a mechanic, but the approaching ships left no room for hesitation. "All right," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "We need to buy time. How long until your ship's ready to take off?" 15 minutes, if the systems hold, Zarian said. "But the scar will reach us in 10. Ethan cursed under his breath. "Then we'll have to get creative." Zarian watched as Ethan rummaged through the back of his workshop, pulling out an assortment of tools, wires, and a few canisters with hazard labels slapped on their sides. Her brows furrowed in confusion. "What are you doing?" "Improvising," Ethan said, holding up a small device he cobbled together. "They want you, right? So we give them something to chase." Zarian stepped closer, studying the device. It was crude compared to her technology, but she could see the brilliance in its simplicity. "A decoy." "Exactly," Ethan said, attaching the device to one of the canisters. "We rig this to emit a signal, something loud and flashy. They'll think it's you." "And when they follow it?" Zarian asked. Ethan grinned, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Then we blow it. Hopefully, it'll buy us the time we need." Zarian hesitated, her gaze lingering on him. "This plan is dangerous." "Yeah, well, so is sitting around waiting to get shot," Ethan said, strapping the canister to a small, hover-capable cargo sled. He activated the sled, and it floated a few feet off the ground with a soft hum. "You've got a better idea. I'm all ears." Zarian tilted her head, then nodded. "Your determination is commendable." "Let's just hope it's enough," Ethan said, pushing the sled toward the ship. "All right, here's the plan. You stay with your ship and get it ready to fly. I'll handle the diversion." Zarian frowned. "Alone? That is unwise." Ethan met her gaze, his expression firm. "Look, I've got a better chance of pulling this off if I don't have to worry about you. Just focus on getting that ship off the ground." She seemed about to argue, but then she nodded, placing a hand on his arm. "Do not take unnecessary risks, Ethan." He smirked. "Unnecessary risks are kind of my specialty." Ethan activated the decoy, just as the scar ships came into clearer view. Sleek and angular, they moved like predators, their dark hulls blending into the Martian sky. He set the hover sled moving across the desert, its signal pulsing brightly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then one of the scar ships veered sharply, breaking formation to pursue the decoy. Ethan exhaled a shaky breath. "That's one down," he muttered. The other two ships, however, remained focused on the crash site. Ethan glanced back at Zarian's ship, its engines now glowing faintly. She was making progress, but they needed more time. He grabbed a makeshift launcher from his workbench, a crude but effective weapon he'd cobbled together from mining equipment. As the scar ships closed in, he steadied his aim and fired. The projectile streaked through the air, exploding near one of the ships. It wasn't a direct hit, but it was enough to send the vessel swerving. Come on," Ethan muttered, reloading as quickly as his shaking hands allowed. The second shot was closer, grazing the ship's wing and sending it spiraling downward. It crashed into the sand with a deafening roar, leaving a plume of smoke in its wake. But the victory was short-lived. The remaining scar ship fired back, a blast of energy scorching the ground mere feet from Ethan. He dove for cover, his heart pounding. "Ethan." Zarian's voice crackled through the communicator she'd given him. "The ship is ready. We must leave now." Ethan peeked out from behind the wreckage, his gaze locking onto the advancing scar ship. It was too close for comfort. "Go," he shouted into the communicator. "I'll keep them off your tail." "No," Zarian said firmly. "I will not leave without you." Ethan gritted his teeth. He was running out of options and time. But as he glanced back at the ship, a plan began to form. It was reckless, desperate, and just stupid enough to work. "All right," he said, grabbing the last explosive from his toolkit. "But when I say go, you hit the throttle and don't look back." Zarian hesitated, but her voice was steady. "Understood." With the Scar ship bearing down on him, Ethan sprinted toward Zarian's vessel, the explosive primed in his hand. He threw it with all his strength, the device sticking to the Scar ship's hull. "Now," he shouted. The explosion lit up the desert, and Ethan dove into the open hatch of Zarian's ship just as it lifted off. The Scar ship disintegrated in the blast, leaving only a cloud of fire and smoke behind. As the ship rocketed into the sky, Ethan collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath. Zarian knelt beside him, her glowing eyes filled with both relief and something deeper. "You risked everything," she said softly. Ethan managed a weak smile. "Guess I'm not great at playing it safe." For the first time, Zarian smiled back. "Perhaps that is why you succeed. The high-stakes escape." The ship rattled violently as it broke through Mars' thin atmosphere, the patched-together systems straining against the immense force. Sparks flew from one of the consoles, and warning lights flashed across the control panel. Ethan clung to the nearest railing, his knuckles white, while Zarian's hands flew across the glowing controls, her focus unshakable. "This is what you call stable," Ethan shouted over the roar of the engines. "The systems are holding," Zarian replied, her voice calm despite the chaos. "Barely." Ethan cast a glance at the rear monitor, where the two remaining Scar ships loomed closer with every passing second. Their sleek, predatory forms cut through the vacuum like knives, their weapons glowing ominously. "We've got company," Ethan yelled. "I am aware," Zarian said, her tone clipped. She pulled the lever, and the ship jerked to the left, narrowly avoiding a blast of plasma that streaked past them. Ethan's heart raced as he watched the Scar ships close the distance. "Can't this thing go any faster?" "It can," Zarian said, her fingers dancing across the controls. "But the core is unstable. If I push it too hard, we risk." A blast rocked the ship, cutting her off. The cabin tilted violently, and Ethan was thrown to the floor. Smoke filled the air as alarms blared around them. "Risk what?" Ethan coughed, dragging himself upright. "Core overload," Zarian said, her voice tight. "If that happens, we will not need to worry about the Scar." Ethan staggered toward the nearest console, his mind racing. "All right, so let's not blow up. What's our play here?" Zarian hesitated, her gaze flickering toward the glowing core monitor. The readings were erratic, the energy levels spiking dangerously. "There is a debris field nearby," she said finally. "If we can reach it, we may be able to lose them." Ethan frowned. "A debris field? That doesn't sound promising." "It is better than open space," Zarian said. "Trust me." Ethan gave a shaky nod. "Lead the way." The ship lurched again as Zarian pushed the engines to their limit, steering toward a dense field of asteroid fragments and abandoned wreckage. The debris loomed ahead, a chaotic maze of jagged metal and spinning rocks. "You're sure about this?" Ethan asked, gripping the railing as the ship weaved between the obstacles. "No," Zarian admitted, "but we have no choice." The first Scar ship entered the field behind them, its weapons firing relentlessly. Zarian pulled the ship into a sharp dive, narrowly dodging a massive shard of metal. Ethan felt his stomach drop as the cabin tilted again, the stars outside spinning wildly. "You could have warned me about the roller coaster ride," he shouted. Zarian didn't reply, her focus unshakable as she guided the ship through the deadly labyrinth. The second Scar ship followed, its pilot more aggressive. A blast from its plasma cannon clipped a nearby asteroid, sending debris hurtling toward them. "Hold on," Zarian shouted, yanking the controls hard to the right. The ship skinned the edge of a spinning chunk of wreckage, sparks flying as the hull scraped against the metal. Ethan winced. You're really cutting it close, aren't you? That is the point, Zarian said, a hint of a smirk on her lips. The Scar ships struggled to keep up as Zarian led them deeper into the debris field. Ethan could see their movements growing more erratic, the pilots forced to make split-second adjustments to avoid colliding with the floating wreckage. Ethan's eyes lit up with an idea. Hey, can we use this junk to our advantage? Zarian glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. Perhaps. What do you have in mind? Ethan pointed to a cluster of large, unstable-looking asteroids ahead. If we can lure them into that cluster and trigger a chain reaction, it might take them out. Zarian's gaze flickered back to the controls. It is a gamble, but it could work. She adjusted the ship's trajectory, heading straight for the cluster. The Scar ships followed, their weapons blazing. Ethan held his breath as they approached the volatile debris, the tension in the cabin thick enough to cut. Get ready, Zarian said, her voice steady. When I give the signal, release the payload. Ethan nodded, his hands hovering over the manual release controls. The seconds stretched into an eternity as the ship dove into the cluster, weaving between the massive asteroids. Now, Zarian shouted. Ethan slammed the release, sending a series of small explosive charges into the cluster. The charges detonated, their shockwaves rippling through the debris. The asteroids collided violently, creating a chain reaction that engulfed the pursuing Scar ships. The first ship was caught in the blast, disintegrating instantly. The second veered away, its hull scorched and damaged, before vanishing into the chaos. Ethan let out a shaky laugh, slumping back against the wall. We did it. We actually did it. Zarian's hands relaxed on the controls, her expression softening. For now. As the ship cleared the debris field, the silence of space stretched around them. Ethan looked out at the stars, his chest still heaving from the adrenaline. He turned to Zarian, a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. You know, he said, for an advanced alien, you're not half bad at crazy plans. Zarian raised an eyebrow. And for a human mechanic, you are surprisingly resourceful. Ethan laughed, the sound filling the cabin. For the first time in what felt like forever, he allowed himself to relax. But deep down, he knew the fight wasn't over. Not yet. The reward of a lifetime. The silence of deep space wrapped around them like a blanket, broken only by the soft hum of the repaired ship. Ethan leaned back in the co-pilot's seat, exhaustion finally catching up to him. His hands ached, his mind was spinning, but a rare sense of accomplishment warmed his chest. He glanced over at Zarian, who was deftly piloting the ship toward a distant cluster of stars. Her glowing eyes were calm now, her expression serene. The tension and urgency that had consumed the last few hours were gone, replaced by a quiet determination. You've got to admit, Ethan said, breaking the silence. That was one hell of a ride. Zarian turned her head slightly, a faint smile curving her lips. Indeed, your resourcefulness was unexpected. Ethan grinned, leaning forward to peer out the window at the vastness of space. I'll take that as a compliment. So, where to now? Back to your people? Zarian hesitated, her fingers brushing over the glowing symbols on the control panel. Yes, but before that, there is something I must do. Ethan raised an eyebrow. What's that? She turned to him, her gaze steady and filled with an intensity he hadn't seen before. You risk your life to save me, Ethan. Not just for me, but for what I carry, for the future of my people. I cannot let that go unanswered. Ethan waved her off, trying to downplay his actions. I just did what anyone with a conscience would do. Zarian's head tilted slightly, her glowing eyes narrowing. No, Ethan. Many would have turned away. Many would have chosen safety over sacrifice. But you did not. That is rare. He shrugged, feeling the heat rise to his face. Yeah, well, I've never been great at playing it safe. Zarian's smile deepened, but there was something else in her expression. Something unspoken. She pressed a button on the console, and a shimmering projection of a star system appeared in the air between them. "This is Aurelia," she said, gesturing to the largest, most radiant star at the center. "A place of light, unity, and peace. It is my home. And now, Ethan Green, I offer it to you." Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "Offer it to me? What does that mean?" "You have proven yourself," Zarian said. "On Aurelia, deeds such as yours are honored. You would be welcomed as one of us, celebrated for your courage and ingenuity. You would no longer be alone." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Ethan's gaze flickered to the hologram of Aurelia. Even as a projection, it was breathtaking. Floating cities, lush landscapes, and radiant energy that seemed to pulse with life itself. It was everything Mars wasn't. "Are you serious?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're saying I could live there, with your people?" Zarian nodded. "Yes, and not just live. You would thrive. Your skills, your spirit, they are rare, even among my kind. Aurelia would be a place where you could finally find purpose." Ethan leaned back in his seat, running a hand through his hair. The idea was almost too much to process. He thought about his life on Mars. The endless monotony, the loneliness, the feeling of being stuck in a place that didn't care if he existed. Aurelia, with its beauty and unity, felt like a dream he didn't deserve. "I don't know," he said after a long pause. "I mean, I'm just a guy who fixes things. I'm not some hero." Zarian's gaze softened. "You are more than you realize, Ethan. Sometimes it takes the right opportunity to see the truth of who we are." Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. "You make it sound so simple." "It is," Zarian said, her tone gentle but firm. "You have already proven your worth. The question is not whether you are worthy, but whether you are ready to embrace what lies ahead." He stared out the window, the endless expanse of stars stretching before them. For the first time in years, he felt something stir within him, a spark of hope, of possibility. Finally, he turned to Zarian, a slow smile spreading across his face. "All right, let's do it. Let's see what this Aurelia of yours is all about." Zarian's smile widened, and she extended a hand. "Welcome to your new beginning, Ethan Green." He shook her hand, the coolness of her touch grounding him in the moment. As the ship soared toward the distant light of Aurelia, Ethan felt the weight of his old life fall away. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was a man with a purpose, a future, and maybe, just maybe, a place to call home.